Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Culture Shock. I'm Paul, and this is my co-chair Kylie. And our podcast is here to talk about the Vietnamese and the Asian American community and addressing the issues around it. So in previous episodes, we talked about things like mental health, modern minority myth, racism, colorism. But in these last two episodes, our concluding episodes, we're just going to talk about whatever the hell we want to. So that's the D. I think one thing that I want to bring up in particular is an emphasis on education. And I think that we briefly skimmed through it, but it was more in a broader topic. So to me, education is very important, as I've emphasized in other episodes. And so here in the United States, I've had the privilege, and I emphasize that like a very big privilege of moving into the United States and being able to afford a college education. A lot of people in America and across the world don't necessarily have that luxury due to financial purposes or strive, or just in general, they just don't want to go to college for a multitude of reasons. And the reason why I really want to advocate for education, and not even just within our community, just everywhere in general, is because I think that living life is a learning process. And so I think a lot of times we forget that, like, oh, college classes are so hard and they're so boring, especially we're getting a lot of online exhaustion. But a lot of times, just remember that in school, you're going to take one class one day, and like it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be until like a couple of years from now. But you're gonna realize how much it applies into your life now. Like I've taken one art class and suddenly I've fallen in love with going to museums and looking at art. And not necessarily the same way, because a lot of people think I'm like, oh, looking at art is like really boring, like I don't really know what it's talking about. But once you really take a class and you really know what it's about, then you see it in a different light. So I think that's one thing to emphasize, is that education allows you to see from different perspectives. And perspective plays into the role of whether when you're going out into society, you're going to necessarily judge somebody based on their race, or have what we call in both psychology and at the university implicit bias against a certain race or something like that. And so, yeah, that's to be something that I really wanted to emphasize and talk about, is education.
Yeah, I think education, especially on college campuses, can occur outside the classroom as well. I don't think I would be the person that I am if I hadn't, met some of the people that I have and interacted with people in the way that I have, and just really, had my views challenged in a way that I did not before I came to college. So yeah, sometimes the classes are such a drag. College is difficult. We're not gonna try and sugarcoat that. I think some people don't give themselves enough credit for really actually getting through college, because it isn't easy. But sort of your development as a human being and as a person during the college years is also so important. And whether that happens on a college campus or not, it's important to get those experiences.
On a more informal note about education would be like, I think it'd be interesting to talk about, and maybe to get to know us more. I feel like we've talked a lot about broad topics to advocate for our community, but we want to also introduce ourselves and really let you guys know who we are, not just as culture chairs, but just as people in the university in general. So my name is Kwa. I'm a second year here in the College of Arts and Sciences, and I've said previously in a bonus episode that I am planning to double major in biology and sociology, and my goal is to use that to work within the public health sector and advocate for things like vaccines and medications to be accessible to marginalized communities. The reason why this is so important to me is that because I know that a lot of times you see it on the news and you kind of brush off facts and statistics because they're boring, like they're just blatantly boring. But the thing is, those statistics, as boring as they may be, will reveal something about society that you might not want to hear, but should be heard so that you can do something about it. For example, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen vaccine rolls out in the United States. Slow as I don't know what. It really is. And as slow as it is not affecting the white Americans as much as it affects people of color. Black Americans, Latinx Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans in general have gotten vaccines a lot slower than white Americans. And why is that? Is because there is racial and racial bias and discrimination within the medicine as well as the public health side of society. And one way that we can fix it is to have people really just go out there from communities that are marginalized to advocate for that within the public health sector. So that is my goal in general after I graduate from college. A fun fact about me is that if I was not a culture trader here, and if I was not at UVA, I would actually be at VCU, which is in Richmond, Virginia, in my hometown studying fashion, because fashion is something that I very much prize. As you can see throughout these podcast episodes, we have changed clothes. The reason why we change clothes is because I forced us to change clothes, because I think that fashion is a really good way for you to express yourself. And that's a very blanket statement, but also there are ways that fashion has really gotten out there to help and advocate for communities. For example, Mara Hoffman in 2007 did a collection piece of, I believe, around 25 different outfits. And she used women as her standpoint to fight for gender equality. And not only did she use women, but she also used women of different ages to fight against the idea of ageism, which is very much happening, but we don't talk about it as much because there are other topics that tend to be prioritized over ageism, such as racism. But ageism is something that we shouldn't just overlook just because it's not talked about a lot. But she used advocates, philanthropists, artists, and all of that stuff, and they're all women in her collection piece, as well as having 4 women from this association to headline her show to talk about why there's such a big gender wealth gap, as well as like things like gender equality when it comes to pay. And so one thing that I've been working on over winter break at the end of December of 2020 is to start my own actually collection, and hopefully that collection can be eventually published in terms of drawings or actual outfits to advocate for our marginalized community. So I would hope that one of these days when I actually have time, not taking my 10,000 credit courses that I'm taking at the university to really, have a really good mindset on my project. And yeah, that's practically everything that I have to talk about me. So I will pass it on to Kylie to talk about herself now.
Yeah, so I'm a 4th year, as we say at UVA, studying systems engineering. I will, fingers crossed, graduate this May. I'm currently looking at jobs and applying to grad schools because I'm sort of interested in changing my area of focus. I've loved systems. If you want to talk about systems, I can talk to you about systems. I think it's really amazing for some people, but for me, that's sort of what I want to do and the things I want to make. It's just not in line with the education that I've received. So I'm sort of thinking a little pivot to industrial design. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah, if I wasn't a systems engineering major, I would probably be okay. I'm gonna get I feel like we're gonna get a lot of hate for this from everyone else in engineering school, but I would probably be an English major. I really love writing, and about 83% of E-school is functionally illiterate, right? So I feel like I'm kind of in the minority here on that one. But yeah, that is my other passion.
Yeah, typically our culture share team here doesn't really get to talk a lot because we do a lot of directing behind the scenes, things like Tet Show and in our fall show, which is Culture Fest. And so our goal is for this podcast to really be something that either is continued by us outside of VSA as a whole when we're not culture chairs anymore in about a month when we start elections. But we're hoping that, maybe on our own personal note, we could, do this podcast or just do like Q&As or lives in general, just talking about really important information about our Vietnamese, Asian American community, as well as other marginalized communities out there, because advocacy is advocacy, and as much as we get the word out there, it will help somebody out there. Even if it's one person, it's a change. And so we hope that this podcast really brings to light a lot of issues that either you may not be aware of, maybe we weren't even aware of until we started researching, but we try to provide as much accurate research information as we can. Obviously, we can't cover everything at once because that requires a little bit too much time, which we currently do not have. But we hope that our experiences and opinions kind of, reach your hearts out there, and really allow you guys to keep promoting and keep advocating for your community. So, that was it for our episode. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on one final episode of our podcast, Culture Shock.
Bye.